Hello. So today I would like to talk about what's called wise view or right view sometimes. It's also called wise or right understanding. And it means having a mental outlook or attitude that will help us to make progress on the spiritual journey. This doesn't mean that there's only one way to look at life or to understand it. I think there are many perspectives that might be referred to as wise or right, and there are certainly many other perspectives that might be considered as unwise. But the difference is that wise views move us towards awakening and away from suffering, and conversely, unwise ones increase our suffering and make us feel worse. So, this talk is about wise view, how to know what is wise. And the Pali word for views or understandings is the word ditti, D-I-T-T-I. And it's usually translated as view or understanding, but these translations don't quite convey the same meaning as the Pali word ditti. Ditti is not merely an opinion or a view or a judgment or a belief, as it so often is in English, and it's not just a cognitive or a rational or an intellectual view. Ditti, in its Pali meaning, is something deeper, and it's about our fundamental outlook on life, our attitudes, our mindsets, our beliefs about life itself. And it influences our thoughts, words, and actions in our relationship with others, our relationships with ourselves, and what we think, do, and say in everyday life. So ditti or wise view is considered a significant and integral part of the Buddhist path. In fact, it's considered so important that it's usually positioned as the very first factor on the Noble Eightfold Path. In this way, it's a starting point for the journey. It's like getting in your car to go somewhere without having a map or a compass or a GPS. You might start to drive, but you really don't know where you're going or what roads to take or where your destination is. We need to have wise view when we start on a journey. And it's the same thing on the spiritual journey. We need an understanding of where we are, what direction to head in, and roughly where we're going. And really, this is what wise view is all about. So having wise view is pretty important. And here's a nice Sufi story about this, and it's about Mullah Nasruddin, who is often portrayed as a kind of likable fool. And one day Mullah Nasruddin is out in his garden and he's sprinkling breadcrumbs around all the flower beds. And a neighbor comes by and asks him, "Mullah, why are you sprinkling breadcrumbs around your flower beds? It doesn't make any sense." And Mullah Nasruddin looks up at his neighbor and replies, "Oh, I do it to keep the tigers away." And the neighbor kind of scratches his head and looks a bit puzzled. And after a few moments, she says, "But Mullah, there aren't any tigers within thousands of miles of here." So then, in a kind of good-humoured way, Mullah Nasruddin says to his neighbor, "Yes, it's a very effective treatment, isn't it?" So in other words, Mullah Nasruddin's view that the breadcrumbs would keep the tigers away was leading him to do something completely ineffective because there were no tigers within thousands of miles. So his view, his unwise view, led him to do something that really didn't make a lot of sense. So our views, whether they are unwise, like Mullah Nasruddin's, or wise, control our thoughts, our words, and our actions. And we all have views, even though most of us are not fully conscious of them until something prompts us to express them. Often I think our views are unexamined opinions or assumptions that we've inherited from our parents, other people, or from our culture or the society we live in. Some unwise views are harmless, like Mullah Nasruddin's, but they can often increase our suffering and the suffering we cause others, as well as undermining our progress on the spiritual path. For example, if I have a view that I'm in some way better than or superior to others, then I'm likely to talk down to people, and I'm likely to cause them harm. I'm likely to cause them to suffer. Similarly, if I believe that if I have a view that life should always give me what I want, then I'm likely to end up disappointed and angry and frustrated and cause myself suffering because of course, life won't always give me what I want. When I was little, I think I was quite judgmental, even though I wasn't really aware of it. And a lot of the time I thought that I was right and others were wrong, that I knew better than them. For example, I argued with my mother quite a lot about bedtime on school nights. I didn't want to go to bed at the time she said. I wanted to stay up late and watch TV. But my view was unwise because on the odd occasion that I did stay up late on a school night, I'd be tired and bad-tempered the next day and not able to learn very much in school. Believing that we are always right can result in us ending up very lonely and angry and sad because we can alienate people so easily. So our views have a wide-reaching influence, whether we're aware of them or not. They structure our perceptions, order our values, and then crystallize into what I might call mental models or mental attitudes through which we interpret ourselves and the world. And because of this, the Buddha often pointed out that we need to be as conscious as possible about our views. In one sutta, one of his teachings called the seed, the Buddha tells his followers that if a seed from a nim tree or a seed from a bitter melon is planted, it will give rise to fruit that is bitter and acrid and distasteful. And similarly, unwise views give rise to unwise decisions that in turn give rise to unwise thoughts, words, and actions. So we really need to understand whether our views are wise or not. Do they decrease our suffering and the suffering of others, or do they increase it? Do they help us on the spiritual path, or do they get in the way? But as long as our views are unconscious, we won't know if they are wise or not. So becoming aware of them, becoming aware of our mental attitudes, our mindsets, is really essential. If we can uncover our views and then discern whether they're wise or not, we can do something about them. We can reject them or modify them if they're unwise, or cultivate them if they're wise. And without doing this, without being aware of our views, we'll probably speak and act like Mullah Nasruddin, confused, ignorant, and deluded, sprinkling breadcrumbs to stop the tigers when there are no tigers close by. So what is wise view exactly in Buddhism? And in a nutshell, I think it's about seeing reality just as it is, beyond our beliefs, our expectations, our assumptions, and our interpretations. And this includes seeing the external world as it is and seeing ourselves as we are. It's about seeing the naked truth of ourselves and the world without adding anything. So wise view requires a really brutal honesty about who we are as people. I think it calls on us to stop pretending to ourselves and to others and to really get familiar with the way we really are. We may have strong beliefs about ourselves, that we are kind or unkind, generous or stingy, worthy or unworthy, but these are only the stories that we tell ourselves. And wise view asks us to get behind these masks that we wear and to see ourselves and others for who we truly are. Sometimes we're loving and sometimes we're not. Sometimes we get angry and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're happy and sometimes we're not. And by getting to know ourselves and developing wise view, we can begin to accept ourselves. And this is the path to freedom, happiness, and contentment. Seeing ourselves and others as we are and accepting what we see doesn't mean that we get complacent and fail to see that we've got room for improvement. But it does mean that we can have a friendly relationship with ourselves and with others. So in this way, I think there's a strong relationship between wise view and happiness. And here's what Thich Nhat Hanh said about this relationship between wise view and happiness. He said, "Our happiness and the happiness of those around us depends on our degree of wise view. Touching reality deeply, knowing what's going on inside and outside ourselves, is the way to liberate ourselves from the suffering that's caused by wrong perceptions." He goes on, "Wise view is not an ideology, a system, or even a path. It is the insight we have into the reality of life, a living insight that fills us with understanding, peace, and love." End of quote. So wise view is seeing ourselves and life deeply. For example, wise view is looking at our lives and seeing that they are impermanent and fleeting, and how this can make everything seem more significant and more precious. Wise view is about looking at our lives and seeing how much suffering we cause ourselves and others, and seeing that this can inspire us to be more compassionate and loving. And wise view is looking at the world and seeing all the suffering and hardship caused by war, violence, poverty, disease, and so on, and understanding that these problems can't be completely alleviated by charity or aid or even changing government policies, because their sources lie in the human heart, and that therefore the solutions are in the same place. Because when we recognize and honor our own suffering and that of the world, we touch into our hearts and open into greater compassion and wisdom. I think wise view also requires an understanding of karma. And karma often gets a bad rap in the West and is quite misunderstood. It really doesn't have to be an esoteric or mystical idea about past lives and rebirth, as is often portrayed. I like to think of karma as simply the relationship between cause and effect. It can mean that what we did and said in the past will influence us in the present. And what we do and say in this moment, this present moment, will influence us in the future. If we've been angry or hurtful to other people in the past, they'll probably be angry and hurtful to us in the present. Similarly, if we are loving and kind to others now, then they will probably be loving and kind to us in the future. Many years ago, someone asked Vipassana teacher Ruth Denison if she could explain karma, because it's often thought of as a very complicated subject. And Ruth said, "Sure. Karma means you don't get away with nothing." And it's that simple. Whatever we do or say influences what we become and how others will treat us. And when we can recognize how karma works in our own lives, it's really amazing because we can see how it can change the direction of our lives. By changing ourselves, we really can change the world around us. When we train ourselves in kindness and compassion and generosity, others become kinder and more compassionate and more generous towards us. And this is really good news, and it can really help inspire us to practice. So in this way, cultivating wholesome qualities such as kindness not only benefits others, it comes back and benefits us. Practicing kindness, compassion, and generosity trains our minds and benefits other people, and then they return it to us and show us kindness, compassion, and generosity. So what appears to be altruistic is also in our own best interests. As the Dalai Lama said, the more adept we become at cultivating an altruistic attitude, the happier we will feel and the more comfortable will be the atmosphere around us. But if our emotions fluctuate wildly and we easily give in to hatred and jealousy, even our friends will avoid us. So wise view is also altruistic because it recognizes that altruism is in our own best interests. So there you have it, wise view. Discerning whether our thoughts, words, and actions lead us towards awakening and away from suffering or not. Seeing ourselves, others, and the world just as they are, just as we are, without beliefs, expectations, and assumptions. Having the courage and the honesty to let go of the stories we tell about ourselves, whether they are stories about how wonderful we are or stories about how terrible we are. Seeing ourselves, others, and the world as fleeting and impermanent, and seeing the suffering we cause others and ourselves. And seeing that being altruistic is really in our own best interests. All of this is wise view. and then letting our hearts be opened by what we see, so that we respond wisely and with love and compassion, and thereby make progress on the spiritual path. Thank you so much for your attention. Goodbye.